Though you probably didn't see it in the skies over the Northland, it is the week of the harvest moon and time for us to bring in the crops and put those gardens to bed. We have a full overview of the past growing season with expert analysis and advice, plus answers to your garden questions on this special harvest moon edition of Great Gardening straight ahead.
Once the plant is infected, there really isn't anything you can do about it.
The root flare is right along here, so we want to make sure that's below ground level.
Watermelons, muskmelons.
This is yellow or gray coneflower.
This one's called Picasso in pink.
Hello and welcome to Great Gardening. I'm Pamela Fish. This 90-minute special edition is packed with great garden information and also an opportunity to join us on a new fall season bus tour. So stay tuned to see how you can be part of that. But first, a warm welcome to our perennial experts, Tom Kasper, the president of the Duluth Garden Flower Society, and Bob Olen, area educator and horticulturist. Welcome back. What a season for gardeners.
Oh, you bet. It's great to be back. It's fun to kind of wrap things up. The season isn't over quite yet, but it has been really remarkable. Yeah. One for the record books.
It's been a great year. Yeah. Another great gardening year.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we have a lot to talk about, but we also want to tell you that with us are our generous volunteers, the master gardeners from St. Louis County. They're here to answer the phones when you call in your garden questions and also to take pledges from those calling about membership support. The numbers to call are on your screen there, 218-788-2844, or toll free you can call 1-877-307-8762. You can also email in your questions to askgardening@wdse.org. Well, gentlemen, as mentioned, a fascinating several months. Let's begin, though, with a summary of what we faced this past growing season.
It was certainly a trying year for those of us that grow lots of flowers. Many of our plants didn't get as large as in a normal year, smaller blooms, fewer blooms, but we did get blooms, so we celebrate each year as we receive it. So it's one of those things that we enjoy what we get in each season. So regardless if it's a lot of blooms or a few blooms, we celebrate that. The things that I've noticed are things that I mentioned. Also, lots of insect and pest problems. It seems like there's more pest problems, maybe because plants are a little bit less healthy because of the conditions that they started with in the spring. A lot of our tender perennials that didn't get that snow cover in November and December didn't survive the winter. So we saw a lot of dieback on plants or complete death on plants. So it was an interesting spring and summer for those of us that grow flowers, but certainly, like anything, it's worth the challenge, and we look forward to a season next year to see what nature brings us. So,
in retrospect, this has been a great season in which to learn and maybe to adjust some of our planting practices in the future, because it really has been the best of all worlds for cool season crops. It's been a real challenging world for warm season crops. We don't know, so plant a diversity of crops and then just encourage what the season gives us. I think that people should look again at many of the leafy greens. They should look again at the crops that we traditionally have grown extremely well in northern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin. You want to watch the calendar and you want to get things in a timely manner, even though if it doesn't quite feel like you should be out there working and should be planting, because a lot of people got discouraged early this year, and if you manage to persevere early in the season, they're being rewarded now. You always want to either order a little bit more seed, watch things. If they don't get out of the ground, come right back in and reseed. In many cases, we've got enough season, so don't be discouraged. And you know, you wouldn't feel that tremendous satisfaction of a little bit of success if there wasn't a little failure along the way. So I think it's been a real interesting year, one of the more remarkable that I've seen, and yet there was a lot to be learned from this.
Boy, you guys are always so optimistic,
to be.
regardless of the challenges, and as you said, very educational. Bob, we saw you standing in front of some corn there, and we know as a warm season crop, that's something that on August 13th, when we took that video, weren't really sure what was going to happen with the corn, but looks like you got some.
We got it in, we got it ripened. It was a challenge. There were some folks on heavier soils. If you went in too early, I think lesson number one, if we're having an extremely cool spring, you have to be very careful about your timing. You got to pull a thermometer out there, check the soil temperatures. So first thing you got to do is you have to get this seed out of the ground, and that requires, with warm season crops, warmer soil temperatures. So getting it out of the ground was the first challenge.
Right.
We survived that, and then getting it to ripen, mature, and sugar. That was the extra challenge.
And
in this
Bob,
kind of
didn't you seed your crops a couple of times?
my tip there, Bob, if at first you don't succeed, just try
Keep
again.
trying.
Squash crop, we actually had to come in and did seed a second time. We lost
Yeah.
85% of our direct seeded squash crop. Had to come in a second time. Yeah.
Wow. Well, glad that you kept at it.
We keep at it.
Okay.
Never, ever give up.
Persevere.
And despite challenging conditions, many flower gardeners in the Twin Ports were thrilled with the results of their efforts. Here's one example.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Sue Beeman, and welcome to my garden. My memory garden was built in 2000, and I have, in memory of Mom, 2 smoke bushes because she was a smoker, and some lilacs, which from my dad, which he loved. And I have the William Baffin climbing rose for a special friend. It was her favorite flower. In fact, it was a cutting from hers. The bench with the arbor here that I have several different kinds of clematis. I have the wisteria, and it bloomed this year. It hasn't bloomed for 4 years, so I was just totally taken aback when I saw this. I had no idea. The bird bath in memory of Mom. Because I started out with the red, blue, and yellow gardens, and now I'm incorporating other colors, I thought, well, I'll have the red pot, blue pot, and the yellow pot to designate those were the original ones. If I know what color the plant is, it goes in to start off in that colored garden. And then, like I say, I like to move things around. I move plants a lot. The red garden, which I redid last year, and planted some more flowering bushes, the redwood gilia and the 9-bark, another wood gilia, and then I'm incorporating some other colors besides red, a little bit of yellow and gold in here too. So I've got primrose in the spring and the corabelles. Now the monarda has just opened up, and the coneflowers will be coming. Then the blue garden, I planted some different flowers in here. Delphinium is new this year. We've got the clematis, 2 different kinds. Then I have a standing clematis, which is a little different. You don't see it too often. This is about as tall as it gets. It's a harebell. I have it in the white and the blue. And I see my lollipop lilies along with the laetris will be hopefully complementing each other. And the Love Lies Bleeding, it's an annual, but I like the color it gives. Over here we have the scarlet runner bean. I love the color. I planted it because I love the color. It's orange and attracts the butterflies, bees, hummingbirds. This is the hosta garden, which I keep fenced in because I don't want the deer eating all of it. The benches are made from, we used to have a group of basswood trees that finally gave out, and so my husband made benches from the basswood trees. So I have a dish that I'd like to do up for an annual, so that one, it was fun. And my berry patch. I have raspberries, Latham raspberries. And Dean made the sign, Sue's berry patch.
Well, Sue had a great year. I know that you've been there before. I think
Yes,
you've been there
several
before,
times.
Tom. A number of years ago, the show hasn't been there for a number of years, so we went back because she made a lot of changes, and it's really looking good.
It's always beautiful.
Yeah. All right. Lots and lots of questions coming in. So, are you guys ready?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Well, a couple of these I got earlier via email, so I'm going to start with that. Tootie Lundgren in Hermantown says, "What's the best time and the best way to trim back my cedar shrubs? Some are low, some are high. And then she did say she had it done professionally in the past, but they didn't fare too well."
Really, best time to prune it is while they're actively growing, new growth. If she wants to do some shaping, most evergreens, if you do it now, you're going to end up with a lot of brown tips next spring. So I would not do it now, only on new growth.
All right.
I agree with that, Tom. I think the great thing about cedar is that you've got quite a large window there. Anytime from when you get the new growth, maybe in June, well up into the end of August or so. But I agree, right now would not be the ideal time.
Here's one from Barb Fisher. I'm not sure where she is, but she has zucchini plants that didn't produce much. The leaves have become a dusty white. Blossoms either fell off or were wilting, and where there was a squash, it started to rot.
Yeah,
Sounds beautiful.
I know.
Sorry.
Poor thing.
And like they say, everybody could grow zucchini,
I
right?
know, you think so, but there are problems with it.
Well, there were this year. 2 years in a row now, we've seen quite a bit of powdery mildew, which is a fungal disease. Sounds as if, from what she described, she had a severe case there. Hopefully, it's responsive to the type of weather conditions we've had, and it shouldn't be a problem the next year. But more and more, I think we're going to have to start looking and selecting seed that is powdery mildew resistant. We've not seen it. The rest of the country's experienced it, and there are more and more selections out there that are powdery mildew resistant. So when you select your seed, I think that's going to be a new criteria for most of our squash.
All right. Barb from the city of Superior wants to know, what's the general rule of thumb for pruning flowering shrubs? Or is there a general rule of thumb?
Well, there is not a hard and fast rule,
Yeah.
but anything that blooms in the spring, forsythia, azaleas, rhododendrons, lilacs, you don't want to prune in the spring. You want to prune them after they've finished blooming and their growth is active.
Okay.
So now they've already set their buds, mostly have set their buds for spring bloom, so you wouldn't want to prune them now. Summer blooming plants like spirea, some of the other plants that give us the beautiful flowers in the summer, you can prune those pretty much any time, including in the spring, because they bloom on new growth.
Okay, great. Tim in Ashland planted my first apple tree this year. How can I protect it from deer and rabbits? That's a
He's
pressing question.
a very, very, very timely question.
Yeah.
I know, Tom, you're not going to like this, but I'm telling you, he wants to construct a very good fence, but before he puts that fence up, he'll want to get a collar around the main stem, because we want to protect from sun scalding, we want to protect from any rabbits or smaller rodents or voles that could get in there. So the collar around the main stem, up as far on that main stem as he can get, and then there should be an airspace between the collar itself, if he's going to use a plastic cylinder, and the trunk itself. And then he really wants to put a substantial fence out there, and you're probably looking at least 6 feet in height. Don't try to get by with a 4-foot fence. They will get over those, they'll push into them. And right now, even if you haven't been attacked by deer, if that's the right term, I think it is.
Deer attack.
A deer mauling.
Well,
right
some
now,
people would say
right.
that's not too strong.
You can get through the whole summer season, and all of a sudden they get very hungry
Right.
as they're laying
Sure.
that tallow fat on right now.
Okay.
So get that fence up as soon as possible.
Okay. Tom from Washburn wants to know, when's the best time to dig dahlias, and how should they be stored?
Well, we're kind of getting to that time. I mean, there's still some time left to enjoy them, but really once you get into October, time to get them out of the ground
Sure.
before a really hard damaging frost, or before we start to get a freeze into the soil. So get them up. You want to clean them, allow them to dry out a little bit, so placing them in the garage or somewhere cool, dry for a little while, then storing them in peat moss or something like that, sphagnum peat moss, in an area that has a controlled climate where it doesn't get below 40 degrees, but doesn't get below 32, because they'll freeze. So in a
them in the
refrigerator
fridge or
or
garage,
if
yeah.
you have a root cellar or a heated garage that really stays in the low 30s to mid 30s, they should be okay.
Yeah, and
So,
I've had luck with those, but I've also not had luck with those. So
yeah, there is some of that.
that's
so.
right.
Tom, do you think letting them go till you get that tip with frost? I think you made that comment. I think that's important because you want to get as much carbohydrate stored as possible.
Yep.
Okay. All right. I think it's Jan. What can be done with raspberries that have a rust on the fruit but not on the foliage?
There is a real challenge.
Is it?
Because you don't know if you're going to have a problem with that rust. So we really don't have a recommendation, fungicide recommendation for control of that. Some years you're going to have it. It's not going to hurt you. It's just very unsightly. But I really don't have a good remedy for that one. Because by the time you see the expression of it, it's too late to do anything about it
This
anyway.
is 11 years, and Bob
Doesn't
finally
have a
doesn't
remedy.
have a
Well, the
remedy.
remedy is a
I
new
don't have a
raspberry plant, right?
Finally.
Okay, how about this one? Kathy from Duluth replanted a peony 2 years ago. The plants are beautiful, but there aren't any blooms. What could be wrong there?
It can take a couple of years after transplanting. A couple of things, though, for Kathy to keep in mind. One of them, the most common reason why they don't bloom, is it's planted too deep. So she wants to make sure the crown of that of the root is only about an inch below the soil surface. So if she's too low, she'll want to raise it right now. The other would be if it's not in a sunny enough spot and not getting enough sun. Third would be a nutrient issue, and really fall with a higher potassium phosphorus content fertilizer, as it is setting those. They're setting their buds now for next year's growth.
Okay.
So.
I'm just going to sneak this one in, even though we have to move on because we're going to be talking about tomatoes. What's an easy way to cover or protect your tomato plants to extend the growing season? That's from Linda in Saginaw.
Easiest way is some kind of a fabric cover.
Okay.
You know, we've got Remade, that product out there. I've even seen people actually take blanketed material and protect them in November. Half that comes off for the light during the day when it's warm enough, and they have to be protected again. But you can protect them up until November, actually.
All right, great. Well, if you're canning tomato sauces and making your favorite salsa recipe, good for you. But if not, you may be among those who got less than you expected from your plants. Here's Bob now with more on that.
Last couple of years, tomatoes have been spectacular. This year, not quite so much, and I can show you why. As we came in and planted our transplants, we generally will get good vigorous vegetative growth followed by fruit set, which will occur initially at the lower portion of the plant. And to maintain and get fertilization, we really have to have consistently warm temperatures night and day for about 36 hours. So this year we were setting fruit in the lower portion of the plant where you really want fruit. That's where your largest fruit is going to be. That's where your earliest maturing fruit is going to come from. But unfortunately, we lost all those flowers. So we lose the flowers, the plant comes along the next tier, several nodes up, and sets another set of blossoms. And then this year, because of the cool temperatures and cool nights in particular, we lost the second and the third tier of blossoms. And then we began to finally set fruit in the upper portion of the plant. It's very late. That's where we're all hoping for a very long, warm, prolonged fall, which still may bail us out of this season. But what we're seeing is a phenomenon. We're continuing in the upper portion of the plant to set a lot of blossom. And most of these blossoms, of course, they may set fruit, but the fruit doesn't really have a chance to mature during this particular growing season. So a lot of fruit in the upper portion of the plant, very little down where we'd really like to see it, and this has been very indicative of this year's growing season.
Bob, again, that was about mid-August when we were looking at those tomato plants. Since then, we have seen some good ripening.
Yeah, actually, the temperature turned around about August 1st, very cold in July, but then, and these are the results you can see again, and these are actually some of the same tomatoes, and the difference is you can see where it set fruit on the upper portion of the plant. These tend to be a little bit smaller in size and not really necessarily indicative of the variety. But they certainly did ripen very nicely, and people should not get discouraged. Anything that's begun to turn will ripen for you, and it's temperature dependent, about 70 degrees day and night. It will actually ripen them. So we did get some good results.
Look how great they look
Those are
today.
beauties.
Turned out very nicely.
All right.
A little smaller than we'd like with this variety, but nonetheless, we did get some ripe fruit.
Okay.
I'm not a big guy, Bob.
You're happy with that.
Well, my colleagues are standing by to tell you about some great gifts that we put together for supporters of this program, including a new fall harvest bus tour. And we'll be back to answer many more of your questions. But first, gardeners are always great about sharing, and we're not just talking about zucchini. Here are some wonderful pictures shared by our generous Northland gardeners. In the gardens of Alroy and Annette Kessler in Rice Lake Township, these Lagio white lilies make a striking contrast against the Diablo 9-bark. The bright lollipop lilies are a gorgeous mass planting, offset by the more demure Casablanca lily behind. Kessler saw their bleeding hearts sprawl through the garden in late spring, while summer brought this hot pink phlox to bloom amidst more of the Casablancas. Barry Lesar shared this photo of his Hoyt Lakes garden, consisting mostly of peonies and marigolds, along with a few daylilies, which Barry says are favorites of the deer. And Tom Blumenberg of Hayward offers a look at some of his most beautiful blooms of the season, from the iris of spring to the brighter sunshine colors of summer. Tom says this is one of the best years he's seen for brilliant blossoms in the garden. If you have garden fare to share, send it to greatgardening@wdse.org or mail to the address on your screen. We love to show what you grow. Welcome back to this Harvest Moon special edition of Great Gardening. I'm here with garden experts Bob Olen and Tom Kasper, and this 2013 growing season had some gardeners really baffled. So there are a lot of.
I had somebody recently call me Tom Olen and referred to him as Bob Kasper.
That's how baffling this garden season was.
We're never in the same place at the same time. He's a hologram right now.
Well, you guys are just the ones to ask some of these baffling questions, and we know you've got the answers. I heard a lot earlier in the year of a question about maple trees, and we have a picture that came from a viewer, Michelle Watsiak. It's from her grandpa's maple tree, and this was, I think, late June or maybe it was mid-July they sent this. What's going on with maple trees?
We saw a lot of this. This is a fungal disease called tar spot. The great thing about it is it's not near as damaging as it may appear. It's just very, very hideous. Most of the maples grew out of it. And again, we've always got these fungal spores that are literally blowing in the wind. Mm-hmm. And when we get the right combination of temperature, rainfall, relative humidity, both night and day for all these things, then we get an expression of a different group of fungi. And this year we saw a lot of tar spot. Again, I would be very careful picking up all of the leaves that come from the tree this year. Make sure that you can compost them well, or our good friends at the sanitary district who do a great job composting could handle those. But the worst thing you could do would be have a big pile of these leaves with all of those pathogens, all of those fungal spores that could reinfect the tree next year.
Right, right. Okay.
So good cleanup this fall, get those leaves out of the,
Yeah.
And in most cases, most of us that compost probably don't get it hot enough to really take care of the spores. So really taking them to the,
Just get the leaves out of there.
getting rid of them to the
Okay.
district or something.
Boy, do we have a pile of questions.
Yes,
So
we do.
Let's get to those.
have our own
Mary
compost
from
pile.
Mary from Zim says, why didn't my PG hydrangea tree form not have any flowers but lots of tight foliage growth?
Without really looking at it, but probably the biggest problem with hydrangeas is deer do like them, and they will trim those buds as they're developing, especially those flower buds. So if she takes a closer look, she may probably notice that they've been trimmed, and
Okay.
more than likely by deer in this case, because PG have been around a long time, very, very hardy, should do just fine.
They should
for us
do
for
well.
And they
the
look
year.
great right now.
Yeah.
They should be in
Yeah,
their peak.
they look
And the
nice.
fact that she has real dense foliage, it would make sense that perhaps the buds got trimmed, and in the process you get this dense foliage from that pruning
Sometimes
process.
the deer are so sneaky you can't even see where they bit off the
They're out
bud,
at
right?
night when we're sleeping.
Okay, Shirley from Duluth, can she plant strawberries in the fall? And then also, when can she divide hostas?
Well, the hostas, Tom.
Hosta, pretty much any time. Now is actually a great time. Fall's perfect for it. So go ahead, Shirley.
Now, in terms of fall planting, we generally don't do that, but if she were to take either a day neutral or ever-bearing strawberries, she could put them in right now. Make sure you mulch them thoroughly. Don't expect great results next year. There isn't a real advantage in fall planting. You're going to do just as well even better, as a matter of fact, if you wait until next spring, but it can in fact be done in the early fall.
Okay.
In other words, Shirley, abandon the strawberries, grow more hostas.
That's right. And your deer will be happy with those. The deer will be happy with either.
That's right. Okay, John from Two Harbors. How do I turn sod into a vegetable garden? How much do I till, and what else should I do?
There is a good question, because
Finally.
They're all good
and
questions.
we have an answer. The reason it's such a good question is fall of the year. That's what we should be doing. Rather than planning, we should be preparing for next year. And getting that sod out of there is going to be absolutely critical. Do it in the fall. You can dig it in the fall and take it out if you don't want to use any chemical compounds. Otherwise, glyphosate or the trade name Roundup will be extremely effective up until about maybe the first week in October. Put it on, slow to react. It will take all that grass out of there, and you'll be ready to go for next spring.
Okay. What can I do for squash with moldy leaves?
There we go. I think it goes back again to the powdery mildew, and there's very little that you really can do. Again, we're going to have to be we're going to have to be more conscious in the future. One thing you always can do is spread them out, but of course squash fill in so much there isn't much opportunity for good air circulation. Look for powdery resilient or resistant squash seed.
Okay. Nancy from Babbitt wants to know, can I grow my tuberous begonias indoors over the winter? And we have seen people do that, but what would you say to that, Tom?
I would probably, it's pretty difficult to get the right conditions to get them to do well. I mean, if she's got a nice sunny location with a pretty decent relative humidity or humidity in the house, they really will tip burn easily with the dry conditions of most of our homes during the wintertime. She's better off going about the same thing that we talked about with the dahlias. Clean them up, dry them out a little bit after the first frost, store them in a cool place. She can plant them early in the season and get them going in March, and then she'll have a nice start for the growing season, but I probably wouldn't try it myself.
All
They
right,
really want that resting period, don't they? Really do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Donna from Lake Nebagaman says her Cortland apples aren't quite ripe yet. How long can I wait before picking? And she's wondering about frost.
Yeah, they'll take a frost. First, Cortland's an absolutely great apple, and the fact that she's able to grow them in that area is a good sign that she's got a prolonged season. I think leave them on, let them take a little bit of frost. When they easily separate from the tree, if you have to tug hard, leave them on so we get some sugar to develop. And she might get another 2-3 weeks before we have to take them.
Wait till after the frost, though.
They'll take the frost, yes.
Okay, all right.
And certainly while we're going to Bayfield, we want those folks to wait as long as possible.
Yeah.
So.
That's right, because you could pick them there.
If I may, I might clarify. You know, apples will take a frost, but we're going to define frost down to about 30 degrees. They will not take a freeze if we get down below about 28 degrees, so I have to be a little careful there.
All right, a lot more questions, but we'll have to wait on those. We have other things to talk about. And right now it's time for another look at a marvelous area garden. This one in Bayfield is a real work of art.
My name is Martha Larson. We are in Bayfield, Wisconsin. The name of my garden is Small Wish, and welcome to my garden. I call it Small Wish because my husband reminds me that I mentioned to him that I wanted to do some clearing on our lower lots and do a little gardening. And one small wish was all I had, and it turned into a little more than what I bargained for. This was just an overgrown area full of bramble and dead trees, as was all of this space here. And you can see I have things labeled because I have so many different plants. It was driving me crazy to not remember their names. So I just labeled those on rocks. Those are the blooms from the hens. I just love those things. They send out little chicks, the hen, and then you pull out the little chicks and you can just put them all over the place, and they're great for erosion control, and they just keep multiplying. And they come in all kinds of different burgundies and greens. They're one of my favorites. Well, I like all the different shades of green, obviously, and I really like thymes. I have a lot of different kinds of thymes with their different shades of purple blossoms. And then I have the ceramic to bring in some blue accent. I love the blue of the sky and the water, but I just wanted a little more of it in the garden, and there's not a lot of blue in the garden naturally. The new varieties are so much better. And I have real good luck with them. They'll be yellow at the top in the spring from some winter burnout, but you can just trim that off and they're fine. I don't think I've lost a boxwood. They do well here. The burgundy tree behind you is a Diablo 9 bark, and that has a pretty color. And then this I'm developing into what a little sedum hill area with different types of sedum. Those are in front of blue Arctic willow, and that's a golden spirit smoke bush. I water just with a bucket the things I've planted this season, and I don't water things I planted any time before, because I figure you either have to make it or not in this huge garden.
Well, it's a pretty incredible place. We're going to have more of Martha's Garden coming in our next segment. But if you remember, this is the year of the squash. It's part of the Duluth Community Garden Program's effort to get people growing and eating more healthy food. And when we were there earlier in the season, they provided us some heirloom squash seeds. Here are the results. I planted these myself and got some really nice looking Anita Schwartz Hubbard squash. Now they're still not ripe, obviously, but I think they should be good eating. They're good size.
Sure, they look good.
Another part of the program is that they're sharing recipes and they're having cooking classes for the One Vegetable, One Community. These are squash dinner rolls. Oh. I've never had them. I don't know about you guys, but let's give them a try. I put lots of butter on there.
I'm not sure if I want to try this.
You first, Tom.
Oh, thanks.
I'm going to see what your reaction.
They're pretty good.
Bold. Smell delicious.
They're pretty good. And you can taste the squash in there. It's sweet.
Delicious.
It is really good.
And that yellow material on the top?
Is butter.
Oh, that helps too.
That always helps too, doesn't it?
They're not bad.
They're good. They're good.
They're not bad. We have the recipe for those dinner rolls on our website. And so check it out, wdse.org/gardening. And you can get that recipe. You can also find out about cooking classes, because they're having more classes coming up to cook all of the squash and the other vegetables that they've been growing and promoting the growth of, because, that's just really a trend right now, growing your own veggies.
And the trend is eating real food again, which is wonderful. So thanks to the folks there, and thanks for the
thank you for the squash rolls. All right, on to more questions. We got a big pile of them here. Let's see. Tom in Barnum wants to know, can I add healthy vegetable plants and greens to a compost pile? Are there any precautions in what you can or cannot add to the compost pile?
I'm really not a big advocate of growing on the compost pile as such. You can grow a lot of material on there, but the one small downside of composting is there are some fungi that can get in the air and that you might react to. So I think it's just a good practice to compost in the compost pile and move that compost out into your garden.
Okay.
And I'm not sure, was that what
I'm not sure if that's a question, but that's
that's
good to know. But I think
we make our own questions.
I think the question may be, can I add healthy vegetable greens to my compost pile?
Sure.
I think maybe that means healthy greens that somebody isn't eating.
That he's disposing of.
Absolutely, absolutely.
It's possibly. You could be right about the question as well, but
yeah, really the only thing you don't want to add to a compost pile are the really meats and things like that. I mean, a lot of the stuff that comes from your kitchen, whether it's scraps from cooking vegetables or things like that, can go in it. It's avoiding meats and stuff like that would attract rodents or animals.
And actually, for our sophisticated gardeners and composters, if you insist on getting a little bit of meat product in there is nitrogen, but you got to get it real deep into the pile. You have to be sure that you've got a lot of material on the outside, so as you say, it doesn't attract.
Okay. This is from someone in Grand Rapids, and she started with 3 ferns in her yard, now has 60 some, and was wondering about transplanting them.
Now's a great time to do it. Fall's really the best time. So go in and dig out, and there are really clumps of them. She can go out and just pull out the entire clump, move it to other places in the garden, or give them away, whatever she'd like to do with them. So now is the time.
And Tom, this is early fall, so this is an ideal time to be moving a lot of product, doing a lot of design, dividing, and so forth. It's perfect.
All right. Charles from Solon Springs has bushels of grapes, Concord grapes, that are still green. Is there any way to extend their growing season?
Well, what all he can do, again, you can try covering. The real downfall is heat units, and we just haven't had them this year to really bring those sugar contents up. So covering to what you can, but we really need that heat during the day to do it.
Hoping for a long fall again.
Long fall again.
Sure.
Yep.
All right. Tracy from Hibbing says, what should be done to our lawns this time of year? Tom, what are you doing with yours?
I'm having my son cut it every 8 days. Give or
There
take.
we go.
Well, and you know, we've talked about fall's a great time if you need to do weed control.
Sure.
It's a great time to be doing that, and also fertilizing with a a fertilizer that's specific for the root and crown development of the grass. So really not something high in nitrogen, but something that will allow it to develop and prepare it to really winter and then come out in the spring. So
Yeah, I think if you were to fertilize a lawn once, and most of our lawns need some fertility because we don't have naturally fertile soils here like they may in central Iowa or southern Minnesota. So if you're going to fertilize once, this is really the ideal time.
Yep.
Here's a couple crabtree questions. A crabapple tree that leafed out in Hibbing. This is from Tracy. It blossomed well, but most of the leaves and blossoms fell off. And then here's one about crab trees in Hillside looking half dead. We had another question about that too, about by Homecroft School. And they were wondering if it was fire blight. So maybe we can take a couple of those crabtree questions.
and it's interesting because I've spent some time the last week or so from all the way from Rochester to north of Duluth, and really throughout the state, seeing a lot of crab apples or ornamental crabs with a lot of foliar drop and very light crowns. So.
Yeah, that's basically probably scab that's going on there. Nothing you do about it except the super sanitation. Clean all those leaves up. And if you are planting, and if you're zone 4, we have a lot of new introductions that are scab resistant, and I'd be looking for some of those. Prairie Fire is a great example where there's good resistance in the newer varieties.
Okay. And then also a birch tree question. My birch trees have brown leaves. About a quarter of the leaf is brown.
And I'm guessing it might be some birch leaf minor where it's been the insect laid its eggs on the developing leaf, and that insect has lived basically between the tissues of the leaves, creating those brown spots throughout it. So
A lot of that this year.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. Mary from Superior says, how far back can you prune a rugosa rose bush? Hers is about 10 feet tall.
to about 9.5. No, she can take it right down to the ground.
Really?
They
Okay.
will sprout. It probably won't bloom a lot next year, but the year after that it will bloom very nicely. So wow, a 10-foot rugosa, that is a big rose.
Yeah, that's something, huh?
Sometimes there's a time just to prune right at ground level
Yep.
and be surprised what that'll do for them.
Yeah.
Let's see, May from Friedenberg planted corn. It grew really well and tasseled out, but there weren't any ears. What could have happened there?
That's just classic. She's got too late a maturing variety. As you're going through your seed catalogs, get your sweet corn down under about 75 days. And that's the problem with field corn in northern Minnesota. We really have to chop it or ensile it for animal feed. We really have trouble actually getting the ears to set up. So just too late maturity. Stay down below 75 days and she'll be just fine.
All right. And one more quick one. How do I get rid of snow on the mountain? I love it, but it does spread like
snow even in
crazy.
September.
It's actually pretty easy. I mean, you can dig it out
Sure.
with just some work with that, but it also is very responsive to the product Bob had mentioned earlier, glyphosate. A spray right now will be pretty effective in the control, and probably a follow-up next spring will take care of it. So.
Okay. Wow, we just got a lot of great information, and there is more to come in just a bit. Some information also on how you can be a supporter of great gardening and join us on an upcoming Bayfield Apple Harvest Tour. But first, perennial flowers brighten your gardens year after year. They are nature's gift that keeps on giving, especially when properly divided. Here's Tom to tell us how.
Spring's a great time to divide a lot of your perennials, but so is the fall. And you can see we've got lots of perennials here to choose from. And some of them, depending on the variety of perennial, really should only be split either in the spring or in the fall. Others you can split anytime. Daylilies, spring or fall, they'll work. They're very hardy and thrive. Get them into containers. They'll even survive in the winter in containers if you protect them, if you want to plant them then next spring. So we've got an iris here. A couple of things we want to do in the fall, and it's one of those perennials that you really only want to divide in the fall. So in this case, it looks like it was too deep, so we could pull that out, raise it up. The other thing you want to do with irises in late August into early September is to start going in and cutting them down, and you want to cut them to maybe leave only 3 or 4 inches of the leaves. This will reduce some of the insect and disease problems that can plague irises if you kind of let them go. One of my favorite perennials, if there's a garden I'm going to have, it's going to have a peony plant in it. Peonies, like irises, really only should be divided in the fall, and it's even a little more precise than just in the fall. It's really from about August 15th to about the end of September, late September. In this case, I would dig up the whole plant, though. It's difficult to just go in and remove part of it, because what you want to do is you really want to be able to see the root. Ensure that you have 3 to 5 eyes on each of the roots that you're going to use for division, and plant it in the ground. And again, like an iris, we want to make sure that it's not planted too deep. Seed them, and you can see we have a couple different varieties. Easy to take care of, and we're into September now, and you can see that the flowers are just coming on, so it's a great fall blooming plant, perfect for attracting those late season butterflies to the garden as well. Best to divide these in the spring, actually, just as the heads are emerging is the perfect time to divide them, so you can take that whole clump up or cut it into pieces right in place and remove sections of it. As a stilby, you can see the soft pinkish white flowers in the back, and they come in a tremendous variety of colors and sizes, from the very small like we see here up to 2 and 3 feet in height. Best to divide astilbes in the spring. Easy to divide. Go in and dig out the clump, break it into pieces, and you don't need a lot of it. So even a plant like that size could give you as many as 10 astilbes in containers. Hosta is one of my favorite filler plants in the garden. You can get them in a variety of sizes. In this case, we've got a hosta variety called June. Very easy to divide. Can divide it pretty much any time that the ground is usable for us. So if it isn't frozen, you can divide your hostas any time between spring and late fall, and they'll do very well. Phlox, again, easy to divide. Best to divide them in the spring. I would take this clump out, and I will take this clump out because it's gotten very large. Take it out, break it up into pieces about like that. I'm probably going to get a dozen to 15 plants out of this. Put a few of them back in this garden as I renovate it, and then use the others in other places in the garden or in other folks' gardens.
We're back with this special Harvest Moon edition of Great Gardening. Our experts Bob Olen and Tom Kasper continue to share their wealth of garden information, and you guys really know your stuff.
Well, and we really have to talk about that tour for a second.
Okay.
That is just a fantastic opportunity for people to travel to Bayfield,
see the fall colors.
Apples, see the fall colors along the south shore of Wisconsin. Stop in Bayfield. We're going to have a great lunch. Going to get to visit with Bob and I. I mean, what's that worth?
I know.
and really to experience the apple orchard really from the inside. We're going to talk to the growers and learn what they've done for years, and family traditions like Hauser's that have been there for 100 years growing apples for our region. What an excellent opportunity.
Should
and
be a really fun day. I'm so looking forward to that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Taste some cider and pick some apples.
It is
See the fall colors.
Well, we're not going to allow Pam to drive the bus.
No.
So it's all safe.
No. Okay. Well, we are going to have some more information and more questions for you guys. Everybody's here to find out how much you really know. I know that you know a lot, but there really is always something more to learn, isn't there? And Bob, you talked about that this season. There were surprises.
Always surprises, yes.
All right.
And that's what really makes it interesting, because you really don't know. The weather dictates so much of what's happening, and it can be different every year, and you just kind of have to respond to what comes.
Absolutely. Well, here's a case in point. While growing raspberries this year, we saw something that was really exceptional.
The summer crop is still just beginning to set up and gradually maturing. So that's extremely late. That would be done by August 1st typically. So we're seeing that phenomenon going on. And that ripening process is triggered by warmth. So all of that has been really delayed. Now at the same time, we've got the fall bearing crop that's coming in very early. And that fruit set is really triggered by vegetative growth initially on those canes. So we have a very interesting phenomenon where we're harvesting the main June bearing crop at the same time we're harvesting a fall crop, which we've never really seen before.
So that's just one of the interesting phenomena that we saw this season that, was triggered by weather and different conditions.
I've never really seen the two crops overlap like that.
Yeah.
One was very late and the other was very early. And, fall bearing raspberries are really interesting. Most of the raspberries in the country are in fact fall bearers, but they really, because of our early frost, they're not a big crop here. So we're looking at new early setting fall bearers. But here we've got everything kind of crossed up.
Yeah, yeah.
So early fall in northern Minnesota is what, July 1st? I am just kidding.
Boy, it felt like it in July.
It felt like it this year.
Yeah.
Okay, on to some more questions, and we've got some really interesting ones. This one about a small bamboo plant that's outgrowing its container. What kind of soil should I use for bamboo?
Do they actually want to grow it?
Yeah,
Well, if you can contain it, I suppose it's nice.
yeah, and it'll grow in any soil, so I
Would
don't
it?
think you
Okay.
really have to be very selective
Don't
with
people
it.
grow it in just water too? Or?
Well, there is a tropical kind
Okay.
that people are growing as houseplants. We're making an assumption that they're growing the
This is a
Japanese knotweed.
Okay.
The fleece flower program. Yeah. That's
All right.
so invasive, really.
Yeah,
that you
that's-
keep it in the container. That would be our advice.
In the garage. In the
In
container.
the garage in the dark.
All right, Leroy near Brewabick has a lilac hedge that's 75 feet long, 8 to 10 feet high. When should they be pruned? How short can they be cut?
Well, if Leroy doesn't mind losing the blooms for next year, he can cut it now and cut
Okay.
it down. It's going to take a year or two to come back, but it will grow probably 4 feet next year and then start to bloom the following year. So if he wants to maintain the bloom, he can go in and selectively remove some of the larger growth, and it will continue to bloom, and just do that selectively over a couple of years. So.
Okay.
You think he has to be a little careful not getting down into that real woody material because that won't really resprout for him.
So maybe 12 inches.
Okay. All right. Well, some interesting tomato questions. Mary planted tomatoes next to potatoes, and then when she pulled the potato plants, they had small green tomato-looking growths at the top. She cut into them, and they were odorless and tasteless.
Interesting. This is actually the fruit of the potato in this particular case.
Oh, okay, okay.
And of course, what we're consuming with a potato is this underground stem or the tuber. But they actually do flower, and when the flowers are fertilized, you actually get a fruit. And fortunately, a tomato fruit is much more developed than a potato fruit, if I got that right.
Beautiful.
You say tomato,
Potato or
potato,
tomato or
potato.
whatever.
Okay. Well, good to know about that. And Chuck from Meadowlands says tomato plants grew well, had fruit early. The tomatoes died midsummer, though. His crop failed. What might have caused that?
Well, that's a little unusual. The first thing you automatically think of is any number of fungal diseases, but I don't think that's the case here because they went down mid-season for them, and usually we'll see these diseases a little bit later, certainly into August, particularly this year. My suspicions, if they fell down quickly, it could have been a verticillium wilt. Once again, where we talked about looking at days to maturity, you really want to look at VFN-resistant materials that are resistant to verticillium wilt, and that sounds like that's what that may have been there.
Okay. I think we already covered this, Tom, but Pat in Duluth wants to transplant several types of lilies. Do that now or in the spring?
Depending if it's a daylily, you can do it now or
Right.
the spring. If it's Oriental or Asiatic, best to do it in the spring.
Okay. And Shirley from Vermilion picked her squash before a killing frost. Is there a way to ripen that? What's the best way to ripen them indoors?
Squash are very difficult to ripen after they've been taken from the plant. So again, it is a good question. I think you can develop a little bit of sugar. Try to hold them at 70, 75 degrees, 24 hours a day. But for most folks, cover those squash plants. Try to keep the squash plants, particularly in a year like this, try to keep them alive as long as you can. Because if there's green tissue, then you're actually building sugar. But squash is different than tomatoes. Tomatoes we can ripen very early. Winter squash is very difficult to do.
And so when's the best time to pick them?
Well, you want to pick them when they're ripe.
Good answer.
And that's up to you. It really is a good question, but a couple of the indicators you can always slice into them, of course, and if you get a lot of green tissue there instead of your typically orange or yellow tissue. But to get some indications, you really want to take your thumbnail and you want to make sure that the rind is firm.
Okay.
You want to make sure that they snap off easily from the vine. And typically, most of our winter squash would be green in color, the buttercups, as well as the kabochas and others. You'll see a yellowing patch on the lower side of the plant. So there are a couple of good indicators, but you're never really sure until you cut in them.
Okay.
But let them go, particularly in a year like this, let those squash go as long as you possibly can.
All right, good to know. Okay, well now we want to take you back to beautiful Bayfield, Wisconsin, where we toured a pretty amazing hillside garden.
Down on our lower lots, I came across the foundation of an old house that had been there. And it was all crumbled, but there are all kinds of rocks. And so that's kind of how I got started. And I decided to do a few paths. And one thing led to another, and I ended up doing quite a few of them, but I'm about done now. But I've always liked rock paths and alleyways and so on. And I sit up in my living room and look out in the morning and at night and think about where they should be added or what adjustments should be made. And I really enjoy Asian gardens and English gardens and French gardens, Italian gardens, the works. I'm very interested in garden history. I do a lot of that in the winter. And I like reading about famous garden designers, especially at the turn of the century. There's a false cypress right over there, that golden one. And then the other golden one is a gold cone juniper, which is a lovely piece, really keeps it shaped nicely. And then all the topiary, or attempts at topiary here, are yews. And I started out with the bird at the corner there, and I'd like to eventually have all of these yews in a circle be birds looking like they're chatting together, but it takes a while to get the topiary trimmed up years, so we'll see. I have a pear tree in the middle, a kefir pear, and then I have 2 Renier cherries and 2 Bing cherries down here, and Italian prune plums. I just continue to add a lot of color with the various foliage. So always on the lookout for plants that have any color that's other than green for a permanent white, purple, burgundy effect. It's just a pleasure to garden. It's a pleasure to be outside every day, and when something turns out looking nice, it's just a bonus. I really just like the work.
So fun to go back to Martha's. We were there in the spring, remember, Tom?
Right, yeah, on the bus tour, which is a great opportunity for folks to see Bayfield in a completely different way than most of us that have visited there. And Martha, what a gracious host while we were there. And just I've been to a lot of gardens and a lot of gardens all over the country, and that is one of the nicest gardens I've ever been to. It's just spectacular.
And she just loves putting the work into it.
And
so
many different kinds of time. She has so much time. She has time on her hands.
Yeah,
THYME or.
And I can only echo what you both said. She's just so gracious, and that's spectacular. So thank you for a good effort.
Yes.
And got a little time on your hands. There's a good example of how you can use it productively. Yeah?
All right. Well, we have more questions, and we have time for those. So here we go. Wendy from Saginaw says most of her beets were hollowed out. What kind of an animal would do that? And I'm just using the expression that I expect she would use. What kind of an animal would do that to my beets?
Yeah, Bob.
I really think it's those cute little lovely chipmunks.
Okay.
They do quite a job, and they can get through almost any kind of a fence. Chicken wire, I know they pretty much go through, so you really have to go to what we call a hardware cloth around the outside, and maybe even a little netting over the top, because they can get up or over that. So I think it's most likely it's chipmunks or possibly red squirrels that are doing it.
Okay. Louise in Bovee has hostas that she got this summer. Can she still plant them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it, Louise.
All right, good. Linda in Duluth has a Dave Fleming perennial hibiscus. Does it need to be trimmed or just leave it alone?
Well, more than likely it's going to die to the ground anyway in our
Okay.
climate. So she can leave it as is, depending on the type of winter we have, which is as variable as our summers. And if we get plenty of snow cover, it could potentially live partway up on the plant, but most often they die to the ground and come back very, very strong from the root. So.
Okay. All right. They're beautiful too.
Absolutely.
They make lovely,
Huge
huge
flowers.
flowers. Yeah. Okay. Lucille, I think from Saginaw, wants to know what kind of soil should I use for a raised vegetable bed?
It's again a good question. I think she wants to put together a mix, and she wants to make sure that she has a good percentage of that that's a mineral soil, a sandy loam mineral soil. People use different materials. You use compost to mix with that. You can use some acid sphagnum peat moss to mix with that. People will actually use a little bentonite as well, which is a clay material into the mix. So you want to work with a little bit. It should hold. It should be weighty enough. There should be a mineral soil component, but it should drain.
Okay.
In other words, a good soil.
A good soil, yes.
All right. Here's another soil question. What are some good organic additives?
Yes. Good organic attitude. That's what you got.
For my additives to raise my nitrogen levels in my raised gardens.
Well, certainly compost is great for that, although it's only a couple of % nitrogen. So it's going to take some effort over a period of years to really get that nitrogen level up organically. So.
Nitrogen and other nutrient components for the organic grower is a challenge.
Okay.
I think fish emulsions, kelp, green material, chlorophyll does contain nitrogen, so you can use a lot of those types of crops. Green grass will even drive nitrogen levels up for you, but I think most organic growers will probably be going to either a fish emulsion or a blood meal or well composted animal manures as well.
All right. Well, that's all the time for questions right now, but before we know it, we'll be yearning to get back out in the garden. Here's a look now. It's what's coming up in our 12th season on Great Gardening, beginning next March. Next season on Great Gardening, we'll look at the trend in community gardens and see how opening up a space to grow flowers and vegetables can mean plenty for the neighborhood and bring a real sense of good health and goodwill. We'll show you how to let that flair and original style emerge through containers with ideas on potting plants you might never have considered combining. Greenhouses and hoop houses are extending our season in the Northland, providing homegrown fresh produce well beyond the regular garden season. We'll tour gorgeous regional gardens and have weekly timely tips and answers from our experts, beginning next spring on Great Gardening. Well, you also may not be ready to think about winter, but it's going to be here before we know it, right?
Right.
Pleasant thought.
So I wanted to show you a little bit of what we did early last winter. We always still want to surround ourselves with garden decor, so we went to Messini Greenhouse in South Range, Wisconsin, where Mary, who you just saw, showed us how they garden year-round. She put together a lovely winter container, walked us through it step by step, and it really is something that just about anybody can do. We will have that tip for you on our website to show you how you can do it, so please go to the website, wdse.org, for that winter container tip, maybe starting, in just a couple months you want to put something like that together for your front stoop.
And what a great way to extend our season to really decorate for the holidays and use some of those greens, and Mary is such an expert at that.
She's sensational. Now, when she's pulling her gloves on, I'm glad to hear you didn't shoot that in July.
No, actually, we shot that, I think, in early December of last year, which is, when you'd want to start putting together, or even before then.
Even before.
I suppose you guys already have all your fall garden chores done. Everything's taken care of.
We're still hoping that we can ripen a few of those squash. We've
still
got
summer.
a growing season here.
Still hoping it's not here yet. Well, we want to talk about fall garden maintenance because there is a lot to do in the fall.
Right, so certainly watering our trees and shrubs up until freeze, so really making sure. Today's rain helped a lot with those, and a lot of them, our spring blooming ones, are already setting their buds for flowering next year. So getting that water regularly till freeze up is perfect. So.
Okay.
Should we take a look at some of the beds there, some of the second point there,
Yeah,
things you want to clean
some of the
up?
other points, yep.
You know, we talked a lot about a lot of diseased material. Make sure, again, you get the leaves raked up. Make sure that there's any garden debris, a lot of disease on tomatoes and other things. Get that in the compost pile
Right.
or get it off to our good friends at the sanitary district. Do a
Another
good
great
job.
one that people often forget is planting their spring bulbs. You need to do that in the fall, and we're really coming into that prime time to do that right now. Get it done before the ground freezes, although even if you get a little freeze on top of the ground, you can still dig through that and plant your bulbs, and they'll be
Oh,
fine
good,
next year.
good.
And I like that point, making map, taking some pictures. This is really the time to evaluate where you were successful, how you can make some changes, what crops did well for you, what you'd like to try. And while that's really fresh in your memory, and taking a photo is
Absolutely.
That's
just
a
really
great tip, Bob. And also wrap up with a good cleaning of your tools, getting those shovels out, getting the dirt and all that kind of stuff off of them, sharpening your pruner so you're ready for next spring. And really, all of those things, and you're ready for a great
Yeah,
season.
but there's still a lot to do. We
Yes.
better get busy in the next few weeks, right?
That's right.
Okay, there are also some things on our calendar, and you can find more about these on our website. But on the garden calendar, we wanted to tell you about the Duluth Community Garden Project Flower and Seed Fundraiser. We have a link to that. Also, they're going to be burying the roses at the Leif Erikson Rose Garden, so look for more information on that. And Bob, we know that you have something coming up called Garden Fest.
On October 10th, and again, we want to thank St. Louis County Master Gardeners, who are also just great cooks. So we really, in the fall, we like to feature autumn vegetables, and we really want people to, again, consume many of these. So there'll be a taste test of 20-some dishes. But we're also going to talk about planting garlic. We're going to talk a little bit about overcoming some of the challenges and what we learned from this particular season. We're going to share all that information with folks, and we're going to do a segment on squash since it is the year of the squash as well. Should be a great evening, October 10th, St. Lawrence
be.
Church in Piedmont.
Again, go to our website for the winter container tip for more on that. And then one other event that we wanted to talk about, because I think this is so interesting, Bob. It's the full crate, full plate, and that's where people are being encouraged to bring their extras from their garden to the farmers market.
Duluth Farmers Market, we're trying to fill a crate, and we were extremely successful last Saturday. People can either come and buy from the vendors there and contribute to the crate, or bring in some of their extra product. And again, goes through Second Harvest for distribution to all the food
Goes
shelves.
to the food bank. Yeah.
Getting a full crate of product, and thanks to everyone. It's a great community, very generous community, and we've been successful so far, and we want to do it every Saturday. 14th Avenue East and 3rd Street.
Wonderful
Anytime
way
in the
to use
morning.
up those vegetables, to get people eating healthier, and to provide for those in need. All right. Well, we do have another look at the garden photos that were shared by our friends and neighbors across the region. Here's Grow and Show. Janice McDougall raised up some brilliant lilies in her Clam Lake gardens this summer. Their colors shine a light behind St. Francis and are an intrigue to the cat. Janice also shares her white foxglove and the trek of this green insect over a dazzling Shasta daisy. Jan Stevens sends greetings from the Peace Lutheran Church in Poplar, where the aptly named Garden of Eden provides produce for the church food shelf. Kids can pick their own. This year they had success with straw bale gardening as well. And from Ann Hagston of Hibbing, this golden shot of a fritillary butterfly drinking the nectar from her butterfly bush. A lovely, luscious garden treat. If you have garden photos to share, please send them to greatgardening@wdse.org or mail to the address on your screen, and let us show what you grow. And really keep those pictures coming in, because we have a whole season coming up starting in March, and we know that the flowers won't be blooming yet then, so we want to see what you grew this
And look
season.
at this beautiful bounty. I mean, this
is
should
gorgeous.
inspire folks to garden.
This is just beautiful.
from-
Thank you,
from-
Bob, for bringing in all these wonderful, delicious-looking vegetables. And
Yeah, from food to flowers.
by the looks of this, and our mums, it was a great growing season.
It was really a great growing season.
Okay. Well, we want to thank our phone volunteers, St. Louis County Master Gardeners. Remember, again, our next season of Great Gardening begins March 13th. That's right around the corner. Parting words of wisdom from the experts here?
Slow down and enjoy your time in the garden.
Oh, absolutely. Enjoy it. And I know you guys do.
Really do, yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, without some of the challenges, you wouldn't get the extreme pleasure you do from being successful.
Yeah.
So.
Well, thank you again for your expertise and your inspiration. We really appreciate it. Thanks to all who called in those questions, and please stay tuned to find out how you can support great gardening and your public television station. From all of us here, thanks for watching and enjoy the garden.